The planet of Aelirian was once a marvel of the galaxy. Towering cities with crystal towers, vast fields of alien crops, and shimmering oceans that reflected the light of distant stars. It had everything that made a world thrive. The Aelirian were a proud and powerful race. Their technology was advanced, and their culture rich with history, but that was centuries ago. Now the planet was a shadow of what it had once been. The grand cities lay in ruins, the oceans had dried up, and the Aelirian themselves were a dwindling people. Few now roamed the once bustling streets. Their leaders, once revered across the galaxy, had disappeared, leaving the people to fend for themselves. Aelirian was no longer seen as a beacon of power. It was a forgotten world. Over the years, every other civilization in the galaxy had moved on, abandoning the Aelirian to their fate. There had been a time when the galaxy had watched over them, when their technology was sought after, when alliances were formed and trade routes were opened. But after a devastating war, the Aelirian were left behind. The very civilizations that had once thrived alongside them turned their backs. The Aelirian were now nothing more than a memory in the archives of galactic councils, their distress signals ignored. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, the Aelirian struggled. Their once immense resources were drained, and their people were scattered, trying to survive. It wasn't that they lacked the knowledge or the skills to restore their world. No, that was still within their reach. But they lacked the strength, the hope, and the unity they once had. Many had given up. Some believed the only way forward was to simply wait for their inevitable end. On one particularly quiet day, a young Aelirian woman named Nera stood on the edge of a cliff, staring out at the barren horizon. The land was dry now, and where once there had been lush forests, only twisted trees and cracked earth remained. Nera's thoughts were clouded with sadness, but also with a growing sense of anger. Why had they been abandoned? Why had no one helped them? Her people had once helped others across the galaxy. They had been generous with their knowledge, eager to share their discoveries. Yet now, their cries for help fell on deaf ears. Nera's heart ached as she wondered if anyone in the galaxy even remembered them. The Aelirian had been forgotten, their planet ignored, left to rot in isolation. As she gazed out over the wasteland, Nera's hope began to fade. It seemed as though no one cared. They had given everything they had to the galaxy, and in return, they had been abandoned. But little did she know, change was on the horizon, and it would come from the most unexpected of places, the humans. The stars above the Aelirian world were cold and distant, just as the galaxy had become for the abandoned race. It had been months since anyone had contacted them, and Nera, like many of her people, had grown used to the silence. They had learned to survive in isolation, but the reality of their abandonment weighed heavily on every soul. One day, as Nera walked through the desolate remains of her city, she noticed something unusual. A group of strangers had landed on the outskirts of the ruins. The air was still, the only sound the faint hum of the strangers' ship's engines. Nera's heart raced. Who were they? Could they be the ones who had come to help them? Curiosity pushed her forward. She wasn't alone. Other Aelirian, equally curious, had gathered nearby, watching from behind the shattered walls of buildings. Most had learned to keep their distance from outsiders, but today felt different. Today there was something that made Nera believe, just for a moment, that hope might not be as lost as she had thought. The strangers weren't like any other species she had encountered. They were human. Their appearance was simple, not like the grandiose beings the Aelirian had once known, but there was a quiet strength in their demeanor, something Nera had not seen in a long time. They didn't look afraid of the abandoned world around them. In fact, they seemed determined. A human officer, dressed in a plain uniform, stepped forward from the group. He was tall and sturdy, his eyes scanning the surroundings with an air of purpose. His name was Captain James Turner, and he had been sent to investigate the reports about the Aelirian and their mysterious disappearance from the galactic scene. "What is this place?" Captain Turner asked, his voice steady but filled with wonder. He had studied the ancient records, read about the Aelirian, but seeing their planet in person was another experience entirely. It was as though time itself had turned its back on this world. Nera stepped forward, her heart pounding. She had to speak. For the first time in years, someone was standing on their land, asking questions, showing interest. She swallowed her fear and said, "This is the world of the Aelirian, the forgotten race. We were once a proud people, but we have been left behind." Captain Turner's eyes softened. He could hear the sorrow in her voice, and he knew instantly that he couldn't walk away from this. "We've come to help," he said with conviction. "We've heard your cries for help, and we're here to listen." The humans didn't just offer empty words. They offered hope. They spoke of alliances with other civilizations, of resources they could provide, and of a future where the Aelirian could stand tall once more. For Nera and her people, it was a dream they thought had died long ago. No one had cared about them in so long. The promise of human aid felt like a lifeline. As the humans began setting up their base of operations and talking with the Aelirian leaders, Nera watched from a distance. Could it be true? Could this small group of humans really change the fate of her people? She felt a flicker of hope in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience for so long. For the first time in years, the Aelirian weren't alone. And as Nera looked up at the sky, she felt a spark of belief. Maybe, just maybe, there was a future for them after all. The humans were not like the Aelirians' past allies. They didn't come with demands or expectations. They came with kindness, curiosity, and an eagerness to understand. Captain Turner, along with his team, worked closely with the Aelirian, not as conquerors, but as helpers. They wanted to know the history of the Aelirian, their culture, and how they had fallen so far from their once great civilization. Nera found herself speaking more to the humans than she had to anyone in years. There was something different about them. They didn't view the Aelirian as a broken race, but rather as a people with potential. Potential that, with the right support, could be reignited. One evening, Captain Turner sat with Nera under the ruins of an ancient Aelirian temple. The stone was weathered, its once beautiful carvings almost faded beyond recognition. He looked at Nera with genuine interest, eager to hear her story. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. "Why did your people fall?" Nera stared at the ground, her mind flooded with painful memories. "We were betrayed," she began slowly. "Other civilizations, those we helped, turned their backs on us when we needed them most. After the war, it seemed like no one cared anymore. We fought to survive, but the isolation, the loss, it broke us." She paused, swallowing back the grief that threatened to overtake her. The memories were still too fresh, too raw. Captain Turner listened quietly, not interrupting. He had heard whispers of the Aelirian struggles, but hearing it from one of their own brought the reality of their pain into sharp focus. "What if I told you," Captain Turner began, his voice hopeful, "that we're not here to abandon you. We're here to help you rebuild. I've read about your technology, your advancements. You have the knowledge to rise again. We can work together. There are others in the galaxy who will listen to us now, if we stand united." Nera's eyes met his. For a moment, she saw something in the humans she hadn't seen in anyone else for a long time. Sincerity. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something new. Her people had suffered for so long, and now here were humans, offering a hand, offering support. "What's the first step?" Nera asked quietly, a flicker of hope lighting in her eyes. Captain Turner smiled. "The first step is to remember who you are. You were once leaders, innovators, teachers. You don't have to start from nothing. We'll help you rebuild your cities, restore your knowledge. We'll bring your people back together." Over the next few days, the humans began sharing their knowledge with the Aelirian. They taught them new methods of farming, repairing the old energy systems, and rebuilding the structures that had once stood as a symbol of Aelirian strength. But it wasn't just the physical rebuilding that was important. It was the rebuilding of hope, of spirit. The Aelirian had forgotten what it felt like to have a future. Now, with the humans' help, they were beginning to remember. Nera watched as her people worked alongside the humans, their skills slowly returning. It was like the first light of dawn breaking over a long, dark night. The Aelirian were not lost. They were just waiting for someone to remind them of who they had been, and who they could be again. While the humans worked tirelessly to assist the Aelirian, their efforts were not without opposition. Far away, in the heart of the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched with growing concern. The Council, made up of representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, had long kept their distance from the Aelirian. They had chosen to ignore the cries for help from a species they considered to be past its prime. They saw the Aelirian as a problem they didn't want to deal with. The news of the humans' intervention reached the council chambers, and it was met with resistance. Council members argued passionately, some with fear, others with frustration. The Aelirian, they said, had been left behind for a reason. They had lost their place in the galaxy, and it wasn't the responsibility of other races to restore them. "This is foolishness," said High Chancellor Olinar, a member of the council who represented the Ethelon, a technologically advanced and powerful species. "The Aelirian are beyond saving. The humans should not be wasting resources on them. They have already cost us too much. The galaxy has moved on." "But this is different," said Councillor Vera, a younger member representing the Solari people. "The humans have taken it upon themselves to help. What if they succeed? What if they manage to bring the Aelirian back? We could gain allies, new technology, and secure our position in the galaxy." Olinar shook his head. "No, it will only stir trouble. Let them waste their time and resources. We cannot afford to involve ourselves in this." His voice hardened. The Aelirian were abandoned for good reason. The galaxy must move forward. The debate grew heated. While some members saw the humans as a potential ally, others feared the risks of stirring up old alliances. The council was split, and the decision was clear. They would do nothing. They would not interfere with the humans' efforts, but they would not offer help either. It was up to the humans to figure it out on their own. Back on the Aelirian world, Nera and Captain Turner heard rumors of the council's decision. It came as no surprise to Nera. She had long believed the galaxy had forgotten them, but hearing it confirmed in such cold, official terms stung deeply. Why do they refuse to help? She asked Captain Turner one evening, her voice tinged with disbelief. What have we done to deserve this? Captain Turner looked at her, his expression softening. Some people don't understand the value of what you have. They're too focused on power, politics, and profit to see what's right in front of them. But we're not giving up. We'll keep pushing forward. The humans' resolve only grew stronger. If the Galactic Council wouldn't help, they would do it on their own. They would prove that the Aelirian were worth saving, not for what they could offer, but because every civilization deserved a chance to rebuild. The struggle wasn't over, but the Aelirian now had something they hadn't had in years, a future, and they weren't going to let it slip away. Not now, not when there was finally hope. Just as the humans and Aelirian were beginning to find their footing, a new danger emerged from the shadows of the galaxy. It came without warning. A fleet of alien ships, dark and menacing, appeared on the outskirts of the Aelirian system. The ships were larger, more advanced, and they carried a reputation that made even the bravest of warriors shudder. They were the Zarsvans, a ruthless alien faction known for their brutality and hunger for conquest. The Zarsvans had no interest in alliances or diplomacy. Their only goal was to seize control of the Aelirian world and claim its resources for themselves. The Aelirian had been weak for so long, their defenses barely functional, making them an easy target for such an aggressive force. When the humans received the first transmission from the Zarsvans, it was nothing more than a cold demand. "Leave this system immediately," the Zarsvan commander's voice echoed through the communication channel. "This world belongs to us now. You have no place here." Captain Turner stood in the command center, his hands gripping the edge of the table as he listened. The words were clear, and the threat was real. The humans had expected challenges, but nothing like this. The Zarsvans were not the type of enemy you could negotiate with. They didn't care about treaties or alliances. They wanted to destroy. "This is bad," Captain Turner said quietly to his team. "The Aelirian are too weak to defend themselves. We have to act fast." The humans had just begun their mission to rebuild the Aelirian civilization, and now they were faced with an even greater challenge: protecting the very people they had come to help. The Aelirian had no military, no strong defense systems. They had been left to rot by the rest of the galaxy for too long. Now they were facing a foe that could wipe them out in a matter of days. Nera, standing with Captain Turner in the command room, could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Her people had already lost so much. Could they survive this new threat? She had seen the humans fight alongside her people, and while they were skilled and strong, even they couldn't fight an entire fleet on their own. "What do we do now?" Nera asked, her voice trembling. "We fight," Captain Turner replied, his voice filled with determination. "We don't give up. Not now, not ever. If we stand together, we might have a chance." The humans quickly mobilized their forces, coordinating with the Aelirian to prepare for the worst. They gathered every piece of technology they could, working day and night to strengthen the Aelirian's defenses. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Nera, too, began rallying her people. She spoke to them of their ancestors, of the strength they once had. She reminded them that they were not weak. They were survivors. The Aelirian were capable of much more than they believed. The humans and Aelirian worked side by side, building makeshift weapons, reinforcing shields, and strategizing for the battle ahead. The Zarsvans were closing in, their ships looming like a storm on the horizon. The galaxy had abandoned them, but the humans hadn't. And together, they would stand their ground, no matter the odds. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. The Zarsvan fleet was close now, only hours away from entering the Aelirian system. The humans and Aelirian had spent every moment since the threat arrived preparing. There was no time for second-guessing. There was only the certainty that they had to fight to survive. Captain Turner stood on the bridge of the human command ship, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The Aelirian world, once full of life, was now a fragile shell of its former self. It was vulnerable, surrounded by a fleet of aggressive enemies. The humans had done what they could, but the odds were against them. "Captain, the Zarsvans are almost here," reported Lieutenant Anna, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Prepare for battle," Captain Turner said, his voice firm. "Tell the Aelirian to get ready. This is it." Nera stood in a war room, surrounded by the Aelirian leaders. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her people. The humans had come to their aid, and now it was their turn to fight alongside them. The Aelirian had once been warriors, long ago. Now they had to find that strength again. "We will stand together," Nera said, her voice echoing through the room. "The Zarsvans may have the numbers, but we have something they don't: our will to survive." The Aelirian nodded, their resolve hardening. They may have been abandoned by the galaxy, but they weren't alone now. The humans had given them something that no enemy could take away: hope. As the first wave of Zarsvan ships entered the system, the humans launched their counterattack. The battle began quickly, the sky above the Aelirian world lighting up with blinding flashes of laser fire. The human ships, although outnumbered, fought fiercely, cutting through the enemy ranks with precision. But it wasn't enough. The Zarsvans had too many ships, too much firepower. The humans were holding their ground, but the fight was far from over. On the surface, the Aelirian began to deploy their makeshift weapons. It wasn't much, but they had developed some surprisingly effective tools with the humans' help. Energy shields flared to life, protecting key buildings. Anti-aircraft guns fired into the sky, attempting to take down the Zarsvan ships that dared to enter their atmosphere. Nera led a group of Aelirian soldiers as they fired from the ground, doing what they could to support the humans above. She could see the smoke rising from the city and the flashes of light in the distance, but she couldn't afford to look away. There were too many lives at stake. "We can't let them take our home," Nera said, firing a shot at a Zarsvan ship that soared overhead. "This is our world, and we will fight for it." Captain Turner's voice came over the comms, calm but urgent. "Aelirian, we need your support in the northern sector. The Zarsvans are breaking through our lines. We need everything you've got." Nera didn't hesitate. She turned to her team. "Let's move out. This fight isn't over yet." The humans and Aelirian fought side by side, pushing back the invaders with everything they had. The battle was chaotic, fierce, and relentless. But there was something different this time. The Aelirian weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. As the hours passed, the tide began to turn. Slowly, the Zarsvan fleet was pushed back. The Aelirians' resilience, combined with the humans' advanced tactics, was proving to be more than the Zarsvans had bargained for. The battle wasn't over yet, but the first signs of victory were beginning to show. Together, the humans and Aelirian had made a stand, and they weren't backing down. The battle raged on for hours, the roar of explosions and the hum of laser fire filling the air. The humans and Aelirian fought side by side, their teamwork becoming more synchronized with each passing minute. They had learned quickly from each other, humans teaching Aelirian to adapt their advanced technology, and Aelirian showing humans the unique ancient strategies that had once made them great warriors. But just as the situation seemed to be slipping into chaos, something unexpected happened. Aelirian soldiers, who had been hesitant and unsure in the beginning, began to fight with a newfound strength. Their movements were no longer clumsy, their attacks were precise, and their confidence grew with every victory. It was as though something deep within them had been awakened. Nera felt it too. As she led her team through the smoke-filled streets, she noticed the change. The Aelirian weren't just reacting to the battle, they were taking control. Their forgotten instincts, buried under years of despair, were returning. "They're remembering who they are," Nera whispered to herself as she ducked behind a broken wall to reload her weapon. She could feel the shift in the air, a surge of power that wasn't there before. Her people were no longer the broken race that had once been abandoned. They were rising from the ashes. In the sky above, Captain Turner watched as the Aelirians' defenses began to strengthen. The human ships had been taking heavy fire, but now the Aelirian had begun to fight back with a fierceness that surprised even him. Anti-aircraft weapons fired in perfect synchronization, knocking down enemy ships one by one. "It's working," he muttered, a smile forming on his face. The Aelirian were no longer relying solely on human help. They were starting to become a force of their own. The Zarsvans, once so confident in their victory, began to falter. They hadn't expected such fierce resistance from the Aelirian, especially after so many years of neglect. Their ships were being shot down from the sky, and the ground forces were encountering much stronger resistance than anticipated. In the streets, Nera saw Aelirian soldiers using advanced tactics that only the most skilled warriors could manage. They set traps, ambushed Zarsvan forces, and fought with a precision that shocked their enemies. It was as though the forgotten power of their ancestors had returned, and with it came a newfound hope for the future. One of the Aelirian commanders, an older male named Philos, stood alongside Nera, leading his forces with strength and determination. "We are not as weak as they thought," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We have always had the power within us. We just needed to remember." Nera nodded, her heart swelling with pride. The Aelirian were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to reclaim their place in the galaxy. And they had the strength to do it. As the battle continued, the Zarsvans began to retreat, their forces scattering in disarray. The Aelirian, with the help of the humans, had turned the tide of the war. It was not just a victory, it was a statement. The Aelirian had awoken. The battle was over. The smoke of war still hung in the air, but the Zarsvans had been defeated. Their once menacing fleet had been scattered, retreating into the void of space. The ground forces that had invaded Aelirian cities were in full retreat, leaving behind nothing but the debris of their failed conquest. Captain Turner stood on the ruined balcony of an Aelirian tower, looking out over the landscape. The once dying world now felt alive again. The people, the Aelirian, had fought back, and they had done it with strength and courage that even the humans had not fully expected. It was a victory, but more than that, it was the beginning of a new chapter. Behind him, Nera walked up, her face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Her people had been through so much, and today they had proven that they were far from finished. The Aelirian were not just survivors, they were a force to be reckoned with. "They're gone," Captain Turner said quietly, his eyes still focused on the horizon. "The Zarsvans are retreating." Nera smiled, though it was a weary smile. "We did it," she said softly. "We fought for our home, for our future." The streets of the capital city were now filled with Aelirians celebrating their victory. The humans, too, were among them, shaking hands, offering assistance where needed, and lending their support. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a symbol of something much greater. The Aelirian had been brought back from the edge of extinction, and now, with the humans by their side, they had a chance to rebuild. "Thank you," Nera said, turning to face Captain Turner. "Thank you for everything you've done, for believing in us when no one else would." Captain Turner gave a small nod, a modest smile crossing his face. "We didn't just believe in you, Nera. We knew you had it in you all along. We just needed to help you remember." Nera looked around at her people. They were strong again, united in a way they hadn't been in centuries. It was as if the very soul of the Aelirian had been reignited. The old Aelirian, the ones who had stood as leaders in the galaxy, were not gone. They had only been hidden, waiting for the right moment to rise again. "We have a long road ahead of us," Nera said, her voice filled with determination. "But we'll rebuild, and this time we won't be forgotten." The humans worked alongside the Aelirian, helping them restore their world. Cities that had once been in ruins now began to show signs of life. Buildings were reconstructed, fields were replanted, and the power systems that had long been shut down were brought back online. It wasn't easy, but it was progress, and every small step forward was a victory. As the days passed, the word of the Aelirian survival spread across the galaxy. The humans had stood by them, and now others were beginning to take notice. The Aelirian were no longer just a forgotten race. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they had found new allies in the humans. For the first time in many years, the Aelirian had hope, and as they looked toward the future, they knew they would never be alone again. As the dust of battle settled, and the Aelirian world began to rebuild, the news of their victory spread quickly across the galaxy. The Human-Aelirian alliance had successfully repelled the Zarsvan invaders, and now the Aelirian stood tall once more. The once abandoned race had reclaimed their home, and the galaxy was watching. The Galactic Council, long indifferent to the Aelirian's plight, was now forced to take notice. They had ignored the Aelirian for years, dismissing them as a forgotten species. But now, with the Aelirian's unexpected resurgence and the humans' involvement, things were changing. High Chancellor Olinar, the stern and calculating leader of the Ethelon, paced in the council chambers. He was not pleased. The Aelirian's victory and the humans' growing influence were threatening the established order of the galaxy. The council had been comfortable in its neutrality, but now there were questions to answer. "This is unacceptable," Olinar said, slamming his fist onto the table. "The humans have interfered in our affairs, and now they've emboldened the Aelirian. We cannot let this stand." Councillor Vera, the younger, more open-minded representative of the Solari, remained calm as Olinar's fury filled the room. "They've earned their place, Olinar. The Aelirian have shown they are capable of much more than we gave them credit for. And the humans, they did what we refused to do. They helped them when no one else would." Olinar sneered. "Help them. They've stirred up trouble. This could lead to instability across the galaxy. Vera shook her head. Instability? Or is it that we fear a species we thought was weak might now have the power to challenge us? The room fell silent as the members of the council mulled over Vira's words. There were many who shared Aelinar's concerns, who viewed the Aelirians' rise as a threat to their dominance in the galaxy. But there were others, like Vira, who saw the humans' actions as a sign of change, a new hope for the galaxy, where even the most forgotten races could rise again. In the midst of this political turmoil, Nera and Captain Turner stood on the balcony of the newly rebuilt Aelirian capital, watching the stars. The galaxy was changing. The Aelirian had fought hard to secure their future, and now they were poised to take their place among the stars once again. "They're talking about us in the council," Nera said softly, her eyes looking out toward the distant stars. "I can feel it. The fear, the uncertainty." Captain Turner nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The galaxy doesn't like change, Nera, especially when it comes from unexpected places. But you've earned your place. You don't need their approval." Nera smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "We're not asking for it. We've survived, we've fought, and now we rebuild." The humans had brought the Aelirian back from the brink of extinction, but it was the Aelirian who had proven their strength. The galaxy would have to reckon with that truth, and no matter how the Galactic Council reacted, the Aelirian were no longer forgotten. They were part of the galaxy's future, and nothing could take that away. The sun rose over the Aelirian world, casting a soft golden light over the land that had seen so much pain and destruction. The battle was over, the invaders were gone, and the Aelirian were rebuilding. Their cities, once reduced to rubble, were slowly being restored to their former glory. It wasn't an easy process, but it was progress. Hope was alive again. Captain Turner stood on the balcony of the human embassy, watching the Aelirian work together to rebuild. He had come to this planet with the simple goal of offering help. Now, as he looked out at the world before him, he realized that he had given more than just aid. He had given them something far more important, a second chance. Behind him, Nera entered the room, her face filled with the determination he had seen in her from the beginning. She had led her people through their darkest days, and now she stood ready to lead them into the future. "How does it feel?" Captain Turner asked, turning to face her. "To see your people coming together again." Nera smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of a new dawn. "It's everything we've dreamed of. We've been so lost for so long. But now, we have a future." The Aelirian had come a long way since the days when they had been abandoned by the galaxy. They had rebuilt not just their cities, but their very spirit. They had rediscovered their strength, and with the help of the humans, they had learned to stand tall again. The Aelirian were no longer a forgotten race. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would have to recognize them. "We've made a difference," Captain Turner said, his voice filled with pride. Nera nodded. "We have. But this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about thriving. It's about building a future where we are no longer afraid, no longer forgotten." For the first time in many years, Nera felt hope course through her veins. Her people had once been powerful, and now they were becoming powerful again. They had learned that even in the darkest of times, they could find strength within themselves, and they had learned that with the help of others, they could rise from the ashes of their past. As the day wore on, the humans and Aelirian worked together, side by side, continuing their efforts to restore the planet. The city's once empty streets were now filled with people, their voices a sign of life returning. Aelirian children played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the air, a sound that had been absent for too long. It wasn't just the Aelirian who had changed. The humans had learned as well. They had come to Aelirian to help, but they had left with something far more valuable, a new understanding of what it meant to be a true ally, a true friend. The Galactic Council had seen the Aelirians rise, and though they had not yet fully accepted them, there was no ignoring the fact that the Aelirian had earned their place. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, and as the Aelirian moved forward, they knew they would never again be abandoned. Together, humans and Aelirian had built something lasting, a legacy of hope. And in that hope, they would find the strength to face whatever challenges the future held.